Hi, my name is Giancarlo. I am a wedding photographer based in Central Florida, Orlando, Florida. I travel all over Florida, the U.S., and internationally to do weddings. I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel. This is a new thing for me. Most of the time, I want to start doing something that feels like I have it pretty much down and it's pretty perfected up to a certain point. But I figured the best way to do this is to dive right into it. And so I was about to call a little bit of an engagement session. And I figure since I've been getting a lot of questions, for those of you guys who follow me on Instagram, I have an Instagram account. It's Giancarlo Wedding Photographer. And I share photos there with tips, and sometimes it's a very limited platform to share things. So hopefully this is an extended version of that. And the goal is to eventually show educational material for photographers and maybe educational materials for couples who are looking to get married, and there's things that myself and us as wedding photographers can share with them. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. Bear with me with the little sort of novice aspect of the whole production for now, but I think it's going to grow into something as I get better at it and as I sort of figure out the little ins and outs of YouTube and making videos. So for now, I've been getting a lot of questions about post-production. Some of my photos, they have a fairly unique look. Let me see if I can find out real quick so I can share with you guys who are not familiar with me. This is my point as far as when it comes to so this is my my Instagram account. For those of you guys who are interested in following me, I share a lot of tips on how to do certain things that that apply to whatever it is that I'm talking about. So, but obviously, as you can see, my editing style is kind of film, more edgy and modern. So I get a lot of questions when it comes to it. So follow me on Instagram, and hopefully this video will help some of you guys out who are curious about what I'm doing behind closed doors. Basically, at this point of this stage of what you're seeing, this is an engagement session that I shot a little bit over a week ago, and I need to deliver it to my clients. And what I usually do is I edit, I select down, I cull down to the ones that I want. This is the stage that takes me the longest because I am a fairly heavy shooter. For a 2-hour engagement session, I ended up probably somewhere around 1,200 photos, which is pretty normal for me. And I usually narrow those down by close to 50%, and then I narrow those down to a fraction of that for my favorites. I tend to deliver quite a large amount of photos to my couples, just because I think they're good, and I think they will enjoy them, and I don't want to sort of just cut short of that. However, the ones that I do enjoy the most, my favorites, is the ones that I end up sharing online and social media, etc., blogging. So this will be the ones that I have here. Now, I use Lightroom, and I use keys. I think that's what they call it. What do they call it? They call it, yeah, VSCO keys. So I use VSCO keys because it helps me create I can use my keyboard to make things happen. So I can go to my my editing module, or I can go back to my thumbnail through here. I can select a photo, go to it. Where am I here? I'm losing myself because I'm not used to looking at it like this. I can change exposure, I can do different things. And I also have a set of presets that I have created for it that I can apply to my photos right off the bat. So, you know, I can even change my white balance, and you know, so that's kind of how it works as far as the technical side, and that's a pretty minimal, quick overview of it. But when it comes to the editing aspects, so you know, these are some of my favorites, and I usually start with some of them that have been pretty much caught my eye, or I start with some that that I can sort of give myself a starting point. Now, this state of editing for me is kind of like the most fun because I'm editing the files that I'm really passionate about, and I'm also sort of setting a standard of how those photos will end up looking. I usually start with a photo that I really like, and you know, the ones that are similar to that light and from that set, I could easily copy and paste. Another thing that I do is, you know, for the majority of the photos being delivered, they will be edited fairly simple, but my favorites are edited in a separate folder as copies of the originals, edited with a more edgier, a little bit more, you know, my signature style look. And the reason I do that, and it's something that I share with my clients, the reason I do that is because I wanted to have some photos that fit what is modern today and what they love me for, and what they're seeing on my website and on my social media and other platforms. But I also wanted to have, you know, some images that are more timeless. So one day when this photo is no longer, you know, we don't no longer use VSCO, or we no longer like this look and we're back to a more traditional look, or whatever the case may be, film is sort of a good place to start, because it's kind of timeless. So without so much bells and whistles, the VSCO presets have very, very clean, you know, timeless feel to it that I think could withstand the test of time, and that's my main goal with that. So, and this is something that I talk to my clients about, and this is something that I deliver as photographers' favorites, and then everything else, you know, sort of in separate collections. So, so my clients love that because I think they understand the reason why that is, and they understand that not every photo is meant to have that look either. A portrait, a very clean traditional portrait, doesn't need that. Might not even look good with that. So yeah, so these are my presets. I have them, you know, I have a fairly simple process of editing, even though sometimes I can get really picky with it and it could take a long time just because I'm looking for exactly what I want out of it. Color is a big deal for me. In the back of the screen, in camera, I usually shoot in monochrome. So I don't even know what the color in these photos most of the time looks. Sometimes I white balance it with the live view. Sometimes I use one of those disc, the color calibration, you know, preset disc. I forget what its name, but you can ask me later and I can post it. Yeah, so that's kind of where it starts. Now, so how do we end up here? So let's find another image. So now I'll be doing some more videos on how to get to this point of the images, on how to get the couples to sort of work like this and to look like this. So posing, editing, post-production process, and how I basically got to this stage here. So, but let's say, you know, we start with an image like this, which I like, and, you know, most of the time I'm going to be pretty close to it right about here. Maybe, you know, sometimes I really like them blown out. Sometimes I want them a little bit more dense. So, but they're all within the same range. So, how did we get here? Let's start from the beginning. Okay, so out of camera. Here's the out of camera image. Now, VSCO has many different film preset packages. I work with the film O2 package, the second one they put out for classic films, and these I start with the Portra 160 NC, and it's a plus plus plus. It gives you a little bit of that faded look. Now, my first preset on my keyboard is exactly that. So when I was showing you that, that is just pretty much look at your photo, shoot it, press the preset, and you're good to go. And that's pretty much how I like to start. And this is what I most of the time deliver to my clients, you know, for the overall images. There might be some adjustments of exposure, and that's it. And pretty much I move on. The reason I don't adjust color a lot is because I do, although I shoot in monochrome, I do tend to shoot in a certain white balance. I tend to stay in the 5Ks. In this case, I'm in the 6Ks. And actually in this case, I think what I did is I actually used my Expo disc. That's what it's called, Expo disc. And I white balanced this image based on the light there. So I didn't have to worry about it later. When I do engagement sessions, I do it a lot. At weddings, sometimes it gets too crazy and I get there's too many things going on and I forget. And then I have to come in here and figure out what my white balance is. So from the start, it will be figuring out what your white balance is in this situation. You could either find something gray, you know, maybe somewhere around there, or let's see, maybe we can get away with the sky. Sky is close. It's a little bit a little red, but let me see, maybe somewhere in here. No, it's still a little red. So let's see, there maybe. A little warm, but some people like warm, so let's see what we get with that. A little too warm for my taste versus what I shot, which is this. But you can also always try, you know, the different presets. Cloudy is usually, you know, good. I think this day was a little daylightish, so it was a little sunnier, so it gets a little closer to what I'd probably like to be. It's a little bit too cool for it, but you know, you get the idea. So once you figure out your white balance and you figure out your preset, there is some really good presets that I also like. I used to use more of. The Fujis are really beautiful. They give you a little bit different look. And also the Portras used to be some of my favorites. And this is why I still stay with Portra. Now, the reason I got away from them is because I wanted to do something a little bit more neutral. You know, Fuji 400, Portra, and then this. So it's up to you. It's a matter of taste. They're all good. Everybody has different tastes. I like my images a little bit more muted, a little bit more toned down. I don't want them overly saturated, overly rich. I don't want them too warm. All those things. So that's important to me. Now, on the same VSCO thing, there is this thing called Fade, and I usually like the Fade Plus. What that does, it changes the tone curve. If you watch here, you see the tone curve. It gives you a little bit of changes here. Now you can do this on your own too. You can actually just crush down the highlights a little bit, and you can open up the fade shadows, and you're gonna get fairly close to what that is. So I like this one because a little bit more, a little bit flatter. It's not as contrasty. So, and then the only other thing I will do is maybe crush down on the highlights. So right here, highlight squash. I'll squash my highlights down, and that probably pretty much will get me close to, yep, that's my preset too. So that's pretty much my preset too. So it's the same thing as exactly what I just did. And then from that point on, I started messing around. You know, I started changing maybe my highlights. shadows a little bit. You know, I don't like the shadows too open because I want some shadows. Whites, you know, I sometimes rather move whites, blow out the whites than blow out here, you know, because this just kind of like totally loses me detail. But with the whites, I can still get some of that overly, you know, open, you know, highlights kind of thing, and I don't lose as much of the detail. And the blacks, you know, depending on how much contrast you want on it, that's usually where I want to do contrast. I'd rather do their contrast there than contrast in contrast because it's so much uglier up there. And like this is a lot cleaner, like versus this. It just gets really ugly really fast. So this preset comes automatically with desaturation, which it doesn't bother me, but you could always take it off if you want a little bit warmer. And then the other part that I really mess around a lot with is this. You know, if I want something to be a little bit more crush, I'll crush this ones, you know, and not quite that much, but let's say I can even crush them as much as something like this, and then just give it a little open fade, and I have a really, really high, you know, high, what is that? That's not high contrast, that's like, you know, really crushed down highlights, you know, and let's see, that should be fairly close to my 5, yeah, that's my 5, see? That's my number 1 5 preset, except that I didn't open the whites as much, and I balanced the whites with the highlights a little bit more. And that's kind of it. So you can see that's kind of where I'm at most of the time. Now, the last part that I really mess around with all the time is with, let's find another photo. I definitely recommend the VSCO keys. I guess even if you're not using VSCO, you could still take advantage of them. I don't see why you wouldn't. Let's see how this one's turned out. It's kind of cool. So, you know, once again, overly warm. I'll probably, you know, I just applied like a auto white balance, and you know, somewhere around there, I might add a little bit of warmth and a little bit of red. So I just did it with my keys, but basically I just went here and I just added a little bit of warm and a little bit of tint, and I made my my white balance. I started with my white balance automatically. So, but from this point on, then I will probably just mess around with grain, and I have a few presets also for grain. Like 9 is 0, 10 is 0, and 9 is 25. So if my preset, for example, has too much grain, I can always crush it down a little bit, or I can, you know, up it up a little bit. Sometimes I like it really high. Sometimes I don't mind going in the 50s when it comes to the grain, because it just kind of works well with the image. The other thing that I do sometimes, I mess with the split toning. I have a couple presets. I don't mess with it a lot. It just depends. If I'm really unhappy with some of the color that I'm getting from it, I will mess around. I have 3 different presets with the split toning that just kind of, you know, put some color into highlights and shadows, and it just kind of balances it out. And this is the ones I use. You're welcome to sort of copy those and start, you know, from that point, and then just kind of adjust as you like your color. But sometimes it works well, because sometimes, you know, like for example, see, it's a little red, and then with that split tone, it just gives me a little bit more of that, you know, natural tone that I like. It's very subtle, and maybe most people will not be able to see it, but I see it, and I like it, and it matters to me. So, and that's it. That's pretty much my post, man. That's where I end up. I love shooting in twilight. Maybe I'll do another one for black and white, but black and white is not much different. I do love my black and white, so maybe I should talk about it just a tad. But it works basically exactly the same way. Most of the time I actually almost mimic it identically, because I'm trying to sort of get almost a very similar look. Whether it was, let me see if I can pull this off. That's one of my black and white presets. And not quite the same, but in some situations it works fairly close. But if you look at some of the settings on the right, they're barely changing. You know, so my settings don't change a whole lot when it comes to, you know, my black and whites and in my color. I do use under the first set of film, VSCO film, I love my Tri-X 400 Kodak. And I think that is actually my very first preset. No, it's not. And it's not my second, and it's not my third. It's just, it's the same preset. I mean, like sometimes I need to add it, because sometimes you just look at it and you're like, okay, this doesn't need any adjustments whatsoever. I mean, honestly, like, I don't need to crush anything here. It actually looks better naturally than with my faded presets. And as you can see, all I'm doing is basically adding a little bit of fading, you know, crushing some of the highlights once again, and doing stuff like that. But in some cases, you know, sometimes it's just nice. Although I do like this, you know, so a little bit too open. But you know, and given that this was shot at twilight, I'm really okay with keeping these a little bit muted and very like almost like a little bit darker. So that's it, man. I hope that makes you know, helps some people, and I hope that you know, that brings some clarity in some of the things that I'm doing, and you know, that's kind of it. I mean, like for example, in a photo like this, I'll try to keep it super clean, you know, even though this one doesn't look so bad. So I'll do a couple, just throw some presets on this and see what happens. And this is kind of how this process works a little bit for me. It becomes a little experimental, and then from that point, you know, see, like this is with some of the split toning. I actually like it with the split toning because it's so warm. That image is so warm. I tend to tone it down a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, I like this one of him. In this case, probably my Tri-X will look perfect without any additional stuff. See, even better than my original. Actually, I might change my original just to replace my 6. What's the difference between my 6 and my 7? And what about 7 and 8? It might be a little too faded. I'm going to switch the original to 8. And I do this all the time. I change my mind all the time, and I keep switching them a little bit. But, you know, I stay within the same range. It's just, you know, I think it's still fine-tuning stuff, you know. You should always fine-tune, I suppose. Anyway, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions.